Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this video. Today we're going to be talking about how to pull off a seamless day for night shot. Let's get right into it. So a day for night shot is essentially when you shoot something in the daytime and then color grade it and use maybe some VFX to make it look like night, hence the day for night part. But Isaac, you say, why don't you just shoot it at night instead of being deceitful? Well, there are a couple reasons. The main one is that your camera is almost never sensitive enough as your eye would be at nighttime, so you would need a ton more lighting, and if you left your $1,000 studio light in your closet and you can't find it, then you might want to stick around for the rest of this video. Another smaller reason is that you can dial in the look that you want after you've shot it to go for more of a realistic or a stylistic choice. So is it even possible to make 2 o'clock in the afternoon look like 2 o'clock at night? The answer is yes, if you play your cards right. From Earth's point of view, the sun and the moon are almost the exact same size, which means they have the same shadow shape and pretty much the same light value, although the sun is obviously a lot brighter. That means that if you adjust the exposure and the tint of your clip, then you can get a pretty good looking day for night shot. So let's take a look at just how to do that. Here are the 4 commandments of day for night shooting. The first commandment is to try to shoot in broad daylight. So what this means is that your image is going to have a lot more contrast within it, so you can kind of emulate the moonlight look that you could get during nighttime. When you shoot something in cloudy weather, it can tend to look a little bit muddy, so yes, you can do it, and Dune got away with it, but you do your thing. So this one goes pretty much hand in hand with the first one, because when you're shooting something in the daytime and then you have to lower the exposure, you don't want to lose your subject, unless you're doing a silhouette. Then you would want the subject to be darker than the background. But you knew that. Whether you're lighting the subject from the front or the back, it's almost always going to look better than having a brighter background. The third commandment is to never overexpose anything in your image. Having something overexposed in your shot is the easiest way to make your shot look like absolute trash. So don't do that. Once something is overexposed, you can never get it back, ever. So pay extra attention to that exposure meter and try to keep it at 0 or -1. So if you have the zebra setting in your camera, then I would highly suggest that you use it. Basically what it is it puts a bunch of stripes over the overexposed parts of your image so that you can tell to fix that. If you are filming inside, then you want to try to avoid shooting outside of windows because it's going to be super bright unless your character is getting abducted and beamed by aliens. Then you would probably want some bright light. Outside, avoid the sky as much as possible.
Avoid the sky as much as possible.
We are very bad at taking our own advice. The main reason for this is because it's just so much brighter than it actually would be if it were in the night. So unless you want to do a bunch of sky replacements and adding stars and stuff, try to avoid the sky as much as possible. If you can't avoid the sky, try to shoot it so the sun is in front of your character, and so they're going to be lit from the front, and that will kind of lift their exposure and make the sky look a little bit darker. So if you have to, do it that way. And the fourth commandment is to keep your shutter speed as low as possible. So the reason for this is if you were actually shooting at night, you would want your shutter speed to be as low as possible so you could collect as much light as you can. So if you have it super high and cranked up, then that kind of gives away that you're shooting it in the day. Now I'm going to actually go outside and get some day for night shots so I can show you how to do this in the field. Literally. So we are going to be shooting a quick sequence where Seth is going to be our thug and he's going to get out of this car. We have a sun that's pretty close to the horizon, so we can get some pretty nice shadows and stuff. Some things that we're trying to avoid is the blown out sky over there. I'm shooting this on log with the camera, so we have as much dynamic range in post to work with as possible. We might have to replace the sky in some of this because it's pretty bright, but we'll just see how it goes. All right, and cut.
But a wisp of a cloud.
Cromwell from Dunland! Hi!
Hi, God!
Okay, so now that we have the shot, the hard part is done. Now all we have to do is make it look like night. This is going to involve some color grading and possibly some minor VFX, kind of depending on how the shots turn out when they're color graded.
Since the sky was really bright and prominent in a lot of our shots, we decided to do some sky replacements using VFX. The first thing I did in the scenes was to make a luminance key. This keys out the brightest part in the footage, which for most of it was the sky. Then I used an image from Pexel.com of stars to put behind the footage. Using a blend mode of overlay, both darkened the sky in the footage and still left the stars bright enough to see. Then I needed to track the shots. I used Mocha AE for this, and it did a pretty decent job. For some of the shots, I was able to track the trees on the horizon, and when there weren't any trees, I was able to track the clouds. If you give it an even close to reasonable tracking area, Mocha will get the job done. I exported that tracking data to a null object, and parented the stars layer to the null. To achieve even more realism, I replicated the depth of field for the stars in the background, using the camera lens blur effect. And that was about it. Now the sky replacements were done, it was time to hand it over to Isaac to finish the color grade.
I'm going to be doing my color grading in Premiere Pro, but if you want to use something like DaVinci Resolve, then go ahead and do that. It's basically the same, and it applies to all color grading software. The first thing I did was to add an adjustment layer over the footage to get an overall grade. I used the Lumetri scopes on the left to gauge the exposure and saturation. My go-to ones are usually the Vector Scope YUV, Parade RGB, and Waveform. Since this is supposed to be night, but we actually want to see, I tried to leave the highlights under 50, making most of the major adjustments with curves. If you want to be super realistic, you could leave it closer to 20, but I went for more what your eyes could see rather than what a camera could actually pick up. Then I made several adjustments in the main panel, making sure to keep the blacks just above 0 and lowering the saturation. Then I dropped the exposure and raised the highlights to increase the contrast in the shot. Fun fact, moonlight is not actually blue, it's white. It's called the Purkinje effect, and it's your eye shifting the hue spectrum over to blue when there's not enough light. Now, you can impress all your friends with this useless fact. You're welcome. Since we're trying to emulate this look, I changed the color temperature over to blue, which is usually what people associate with night. I also used the saturation versus luminance adjustments, which just tells Premiere to drop the saturation of anything above the levels of 30. Since our highlights are usually about 40 or 50, it will make them closer to white than blue. Next, I went through each individual clip and made small adjustments to make them match better with the entire sequence. In the shot where Seth opens the door and the highlights were a bit too bright, I used a mask to lower the exposure. After that, I made a couple tweaks in the shadows, midtones, and highlights, mostly adding a little bit of teal, and we had the finished shot. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, then maybe you'll dig this video over here. It's about gear, Crossbow Productions.